Okay, that was quick. Hello, everyone. We are live. I am live for the second time today. Today, even though I had his name up on the screen, David Adler, our attorney who helps us create the contracts that you guys purchase as interior designers, is here along with Leslie and I to discuss the revision we've made. So hello, Leslie. Hello, David.
Hello.
So great to have you guys here. David, as you know, you and I created these contracts together years ago and have been selling them. And it's amazing how we were able to update these contracts 3 years later, post-COVID, with a lot of extra language that I know came up over the last 3 or 4 years. And you know, litigating it has come up over the last 3 or 4 years. And these new contracts are amazing. I think everyone who bought them already got an update. Anyone who hasn't purchased them and is suffering with having your contract not protect you, let's talk about it. So, all right, David, we have 4 contracts that come in our bundle that you help create as a lawyer, knowing what interior designers are facing. Can you just give us a little overview of what interior designers face in court?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't spend a lot of my time in court, right? But I do spend a lot of my time representing designers from coast to coast, and there are several issues that come up, you know, in the course of a project. Typically, there's questions around, you know, billing, buying goods, working with tradespeople, adding or removing selections from either the scope of the work or a particular room. So a lot of the different kind of moving parts. And over the last few years, we have seen, I think, some just new ways of addressing some of those issues. So
Yes,
that's what we're hoping to do here.
and I would think as a lawyer, you would agree that if you have a solid contract, that's a starting point, but you also have to have great communication along with the contract, as Leslie knows, as a working designer still. And these contracts sort of facilitate that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole point of the contract is to make sure you have something that has everybody's expectations kind of written down in one place, so everybody's, you know, on the same page, so to speak. And so it's a tool that protects both the designer and the homeowner or the client, right? And it is absolutely a tool to, you know, further any kind of discussions about how a designer is billing, what things are going to cost, how much time it's going to take, you know, what are the issues that come up and how do we address those, so that when we do have bumps in the road, we can go back to the contract and say, yeah, we thought about that in advance, and this is how we're going to deal with it.
Yeah, it's the first time where you really look professional. Leslie, can you imagine not using a contract at this stage? Because I met a designer, quite a few the other night, who said, we don't use any contracts. And I was like, oh my God.
Well, I think contracts get a bad rap because we think it's like people are trying to sneak in language or screw you over. There's definitely this, I think, stigma around contracts. And my approach is it's there to outline expectations, communicate our process, and it truly is there to protect both parties. I'm not issuing a contract to a client to say, ha ha ha, I'm in charge, give me your money if something goes wrong. Like, it really truly is, hey, let's talk about this. Let's make sure we agree. What's this going to cost? What's your investment going to be? What's the timeline going to be? What are the deliverables? It really does bring clarity. And I know, Nancy, you and I teach that you need to sit down with your client and walk through the contracts. It isn't just like, here you go, have fun, sign it. But it's truly, let's make sure we're all on the same page. And again, it comes down to just managing expectations on both sides so everybody knows what needs to happen to make it a successful project.
Definitely. All right. So let's talk about the first contract in our bundle, but all of them can also be purchased separately. So we gave you the bundle link in the comments here, but in the description of the live, but you can certainly buy the contracts individually. The bundle is always the best value. But one of the contracts we have in the bundle is Designer for a Day. Some coaches call it Designer by Your Side. It's basically when you're the designer bestie to someone who just wants to kind of shop local and get your opinion of things they're picking out. Not every designer wants to work with people like this, but if you do, we have a contract for you called Designer for a Day contract. And it's a very simple contract. David, explain to us why we don't need much in this 6-hour, you're working with them, but you just want to still protect yourself. What is it all about?
Right. Well, you know, as you said earlier, contracts kind of get a bad rap, right? But what I think people don't recognize is that anytime you have an agreement with somebody, that's a contract, right? Contracts are essentially promises that are legally enforceable, right?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
promises
yeah,
that are legally enforceable. I like that
yeah,
a lot.
absolutely. That's law school 101, baby. Um,
Mhm.
but the point here is that even where you have, something as simple as just, spending some time together, the designer for a day contract really kind of gives the designer and the client opportunity to kind of talk about what the expectations are, put some tasks down on paper so that everybody's, on the same page. This is what I'm going to charge. This is how I'm going to work for you, and that way there's no misunderstandings, and everybody's kind of good to go. And the other thing to keep in mind is sometimes we have things in our mind about the way the relationship should work and should look, but unless those things are written down on paper, the other
Yes.
person may not agree with that. And when it comes time to address that point, the fact that differing sides have different expectations makes it very hard to resolve the issue when you don't have something like a written contract to fall back on.
Absolutely. And in our designer for a day contract, it's basically very simple things that you have to add: your state, your company name, your client's name, and how many hours you're working for them in a single day. And then we give you an opportunity to and an example of a Schedule A, which is the project scope of what you expected to do in that 6 hours, what you were hoping to do. And of course, it's always this is what the goal is, and we're going to do our best, right? So it's a very simple contract. I have it here. We provide it for you in a Word document. You download it to your computer, you change what you need to, and you're done. It's a beautiful thing, honestly.
I want to point out too the fact that we even have a contract for this, because I think a lot of designers, because they're not purchasing furniture, because it's not a long-term engagement, don't always think they need a contract. But you are a consultant. You are sharing your recommendations. There are legal obligations for that. Someone, if they don't like the couch you specified, that could come back on you. So I love that this is available, Nancy, because this is something I think is often overlooked, are contracts for these smaller projects that aren't a full design build scope.
Yeah. And I guess, David, there's a point where if it's a small job, some people don't use contracts, but is that smart?
Well, that's not what I would recommend, of course, right? Like you said, it's a professional relationship here. You're a consultant, you're providing services, and there are certain expectations. And what I like about your contracts, Nancy, is they're really easy, they're really accessible, they're very easy to just kind of like plug and play and get started. And that's why the designer for the day one is just a really easy onboarding kind of contract to use, because it kind of gets those key contract terms that like I said, like that we're thinking about, but we maybe don't know how to write, and we want to make sure that everybody's got them in there.
Yeah. And as much as I always push you, David, can we put that in English? Can we put that in English? Can we make it in 7th grade language or 5th grade language so our clients and my clients' clients understand it? Sometimes we can and sometimes we can't, because sometimes that legal wording has to be the way you've put it in there.
Yeah, I mean, some things just need to be written the way they need to be written, right? And I think we've tried really hard to not use archaic language and complicated sentences, and we've kept it simple for a reason. And simple has its pros and its cons, right? On the one hand, it's really easy to use and it's going to cover most of your bases, but on the other hand, it's not going to protect you, from every single issue that's out there. So it's not 100% bulletproof in that sense, but it's going to cover you most of the time, and certainly for for this, at least with the designer for a day. And every contract we have kind of up the chain, they're really designed to, address that particular relationship.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about Designer on Call now. Designer on Call is an hourly program. You say, what you've asked me to do is going to take 30 hours. I'm going to charge you for 30 hours, work backwards from there. Again, it's always an estimate, and we state that in the contracts. But what I love about the Designer on Call contract enhancements is that we're very specific about, is that 20 hours or 30 hours or 40, whatever you're estimating to do hourly, if that's part of your service model, that you have a 30, 60, or 90 days till that should be completed. Like, it's guiding you and the client to realize, I'm selling you 30 hours, but that doesn't mean 30 hours can be used over a year, right? We've got to have deadlines and milestones, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like this form of contract because I think the prepaid hour model really makes a lot of sense. I think it's fair to both the designer and the homeowner because everybody has skin in the game. Everybody's got a commitment. The designer knows that they can really, spend their time, how much time they have to spend, right? And the client the same way knows what this is going to cost. And at each point in the relationship, everybody I think is on the same page. And like you said, it doesn't because it requires that the time be used within a certain time frame. It keeps everybody honest, and it keeps projects moving forward. So even though it might seem something like a little bit less rigorous or than, let's say, the full service type of relationship, it's still going to be just as efficient.
Yes. And I like, and Leslie, talk about this a little bit, how sometimes the client wants to purchase their own furniture, and other times your service model may be like, I never let the client purchase their own furniture. I'm always going to do it for them. Tell them that there's options.
There are. And I think designer for a day, or sorry, not design for a day.
Designer on call.
Designer on call is usually a model where you are providing consulting services only. You're not typically purchasing, but it's an hourly option. You certainly can be spending some of those hours, or your team spending some of those hours purchasing on your client's behalf. And I love the way the contract is worded. And again, this is something that you're going to walk through with the client and make that decision early. This is not a decision that gets made halfway through. You're like, you know what, you will. Why don't you buy it for me? This is something you need to know up front, because it depends as a designer where you're going to be sourcing from. Do you need a receiver? There's a whole bunch of other things that play into it. So I love that we have a very simple, I think it's a checkbox or initials where it's
option one, option two.
Yep. Client, I'm going to buy my own stuff. You give me the information. Option two, designer's going to buy all the stuff. It is easy peasy. And again, it's managing expectations and just making sure that all parties are clear from the beginning as to who's doing what and how it's all going to happen.
Yeah, I think Leslie mentioned before, it's kind of like it helps with the conversation from the beginning with the client. What are they paying for what, and what are the deliverables? If that's not in your contract, David, then if they sue you, you're basically screwed. You have no documentation besides going through emails and things like that, which is messy.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the worst situation is ever, that you never want to find yourself in is the he said, she said type of controversy, right? Where one person has their version of the facts and you have your version of facts, and never the two shall meet. And that's just the way the world works. So that's why we have a contract, so we can get everybody kind of on the same page as to what was promised, what's expected. You talked about the check the box feature. Again, one of the great features of these contracts is how accessible they are. A lot of my clients really like kind of this check the box kind of functionality. It makes things a little bit more flexible to use, because not every engagement is going to be exactly the same. So, these contracts give designers, the opportunity to kind of be flexible and create a relationship that works for them and their client.
Definitely. And again, we have a Schedule A project scope. So you're not messing with the contract text itself. You're just adding to the back. We give you an example, project scope. What could it be? It could be sourcing bed, bedding, light fixture, and area rug. Maybe that's what you're using your 20 hours for. Maybe someone else hired you to do their bathroom, their primary bathroom, window treatments, and replacing a console, something. Whatever it is, you can add that to the back into scope and not mess around with the nuts and bolts of the contract every single time, because that designers make mistakes often.
Right. And we should probably say, when you're writing out things like scope of work or timelines, just use plain language, just the way that you would talk to your client. We're not looking for any kind of special legalese here. You don't need to say anything in a certain way in order to make it right or enforceable, right? It's just if it's plain English and everybody understands what's being said, that's the way you want it. On the other hand, don't try writing in new terms and conditions, right? We don't want to be adding things to this relationship that aren't already in the contract, because, Nancy and I worked through these and we put a lot of thought into the provisions that are in there, and they're really designed to be, as enforceable as we could possibly make them, given the fact that it's a form contract.
Absolutely. Okay. So we're going to talk about full service design, which is probably what most people are here to listen to. Okay. But when we were going over the full services, when Leslie and I were going over the full service design contract and looking for areas that we could improve our already existing contracts that we sold, we realized that often the designers have this problem when they do full service, they have construction involved. And sometimes a lot of those beginning decisions kind of don't fit into the design phase, which is what our previous full service design contracts started with. The design phase and then the project management phase. It's all in that one contract. But Leslie and I were like, you know what? A lot of times they're asking you to interview some contractors, make recommendations, get them some pricing, talk to the architect for them. Just, Leslie, what else happens pre-construction?
Working with builders, reviewing floor plans, doing furnishings layouts, not picking the sofa fabric and the fringe detail, but the nuts and bolts that really are foundational to make the project happen. And
Yes.
in this phase, you don't always have enough information to even be able to quote the rest of the project. And that was the obstacle we were finding, myself and my business, other designers we coach, is that when full service with construction or remodeling was all in one contract, designers didn't even know, like, well, we have to figure out this before we can do this. And that's why we broke this out to be 2 separate agreements.
I'll go further to say a lot of designers weren't getting paid for that beginning part. They
Right.
They thought, this is just what I have to do in order to get the job. So the client had them working 10, 15, 20 hours before they even said yes, or they bailed on them once they got all that information. So we added a 4th contract to our bundle, which also can be purchased separately, called pre-construction design planning contract. And basically, it's back to kind of an hourly. It's kind of like designer on call, where you're charging hourly, but it's laying out a little bit more in that scope of what you would do for them, and also talks about different schedules. If you need to, this could go on months sometimes, right? So this contract provides for the number of hours you need with the flexibility to then roll into the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting paid to do all that conversation with the architect, with the builders, with the clients, quoting, figuring things out. You're getting paid for that finally. And that's why we added the pre-construction and design planning contract. Where do people normally put that, David? Do they just...
Yeah, I see. So my clients obviously come from a couple different backgrounds. Some are purely residential, some are purely commercial, and some, of course, do a blend of commercial and residential. And what I found is those designer clients of mine who kind of come from the commercial side are a little bit more accustomed to the life cycle where you start the planning before you really know what you're planning for, right? And on the residential side, my clients who have been designers for many, many years and just have a lot of experience and a very strong command of the process, it's much easier for them to kind of roll with different situations, whether it's a new construction home or, it's a remodel, or if it's just, changing a design in an existing home. So the newer, maybe less experienced designers or people who are just, changing their business model, let's say, certainly struggle with this idea of how do I put in time and how do I get involved in that pre-construction phase where, like you said, we don't know what the final dimensions are. We don't know what the final layout's going to be. We're not sure how many rooms there are going to be. Right. So it's hard. And I know so much of what a designer does is very detailed. Right. And when you come up with the design plan, it's very, very thought out and it requires quite a lot of decisions. But those decisions kind of depend on what came before. So I really like this for residential designers, especially if it's if they're working on a new construction home or a new construction condo. This is a great way to kind of get in on that process and have a pathway to sort of the full service type of relationship.
Yeah. And what happened, Leslie and I were coming apart, like people were doing the work and then the clients realized they didn't have enough money to move forward. And that designer put, how many hours in?
Easily 10, 20, 30, even more for larger projects. This really becomes that exploratory phase that a lot of designers, like you said, Nancy, are working for free to get the job. But this is paid design work. This is part of the design process.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So that is the pre-construction design planning contract, which is a mini kind of time-based hourly contract that's pretty simple, but protects you during that stage and gets you paid for all that discovery stage. Okay. All right. So then we go to the full service design contract, which pretty much every designer who's a full designer needs. And if they're not using one, they're risking being sued and not being protected. So we don't want that. All right. So this contract, I'd say the things we added to the contracts, first of all, we teach the hybrid model. So it's a flat design fee, variable project management fee. That's what these contracts are based on. They can be modified and then checked by your own lawyer or by David if you'd want to, but don't modify these without getting them checked by a lawyer. Correct, David?
Correct. Yeah, you don't want to change any of this language, and whether you use me or another lawyer who's familiar with contracts, they can be modified, absolutely. But everything is it's all interconnected, right? So you have to be very, very careful, and changing one section might affect another section. That's why working with an attorney will make sure that changes that you want to make don't undo things elsewhere in the contract.
Yeah, but we have thousands of designers using these contracts without any changes. And
absolutely.
Okay, so all right, so one of the things we added was the description of the phases of the project and the deliverables. Talk about that a little bit, Leslie, like how important that is to talk to the client from the beginning about all of that.
Again, it's managing expectations. Who's going to do what? What's expected of who by when? So the project phases being that concept design phase, detailed design, and then what implementation looks like. So I won't go into the weeds too much of that, but basically during the concept design phase, here's what we're going to be working on. Here's what you're going to get from us at the end of it. Same thing with detailed design. This is what we're going to be doing, how long it's going to take us. Here's what we're going to present to you at the end, what payment looks like for all those goods and services. And then, of course, implementation. Here's what we're going to do for you. Here's what it's going to, that's really the essentials of it is we're going to do this. We're going to give you this. Do we agree that this is thumbs up from everybody? Sign on the dotted line.
Right. And within that, we also added a whole section about revisions, right?
Right.
David.
Yeah. So, this is what everybody talks about, right? This idea of scope creep. And, as little things get tacked on and selections get reselected, or, I've had situations where the design phase has taken so long that selections that were originally made at the beginning are now no longer available, right? When the client's getting around to write the check to buy it. So, the idea here is to really kind of manage scope creep and changes and kind of give the designer a little bit of control and focus, and keep the client on task, right? And it's not to say that revisions can't be made, right? It's just as we need to make changes to the scope that we've agreed to, the designer needs to make sure that they can be compensated for the additional time and expense to accommodate those types of changes. And what I've seen over the last 2 years is all kinds of things. We had a situation where an architect actually gave the designer incorrect dimensions. And when they came time to actually install things, that's when they found out that some of the furniture that they ordered didn't fit.
Oh my God.
And you can imagine the nightmare that ensued. So that's why, having things, like this ability to kind of make changes and keep things on task are very, very important. And in that case, what I think made it relevant was the fact that the architect was forced to make design changes due to a change in the law, which was not communicated to the designer.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So you get the tough cases.
I get the odd ones, that people they just have never seen before, or that they don't know how to handle. But, I can tell you that revisions and scope creep is probably right at the top of the list of things that cause issues in contracts.
And we lay it out clear as day here. What type of revision is acceptable, how revisions can be relayed to the designer, in what time period they should be getting it back to you. And we've added a lot of the details that you guys, it's almost like it's an interior designer's process laid out in a contract.
Yeah.
It's your whole process. So if you're not sure what your process should be and you need contracts, these contract bundles come with training videos, the contract itself, and some damn good advice from Leslie and I on how to run your business along with these contracts to protect you. That's what you guys need. And we added, now I don't know if these are legal things. You can tell us, David, but I needed initials. I needed the interior designer to ask the client to initial in certain spots that I know they constantly try to avoid, anything related to money.
Right.
They try to slip it in like the design, like their client's not going to notice how much it's going to cost, so that they can only do 1 or 2 revisions. I'm not going to mention it. I'm just going to have them sign the contract. And I kind of put in initial spots to stop the designer from being able to bypass those difficult conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. This goes to Leslie's point about managing expectations, right? So having a client initial specific billing terms, make sure that everybody's clear, everybody's on the same page. Legally, do you need to do it? No, but it's a great best practice, and it's a great way to say, you don't remember talking that? Okay, I understand. Well, here's the client, here's the contract where you initialed that we talked about it, right? So sometimes, memories fade, and having little things like this in the contract. Again, our contracts are designed to be very, very accessible. They're designed to be very user friendly, right? And so maybe in some ways we've simplified them in ways others wouldn't. But that's I think our process and our approach. And like you said earlier, some of this is business process, right? Not everything in that contract is in there because the law requires it. But things like revisions, this is a business process that a lot of my clients struggle with, and they're always looking to me to say, hey, how can I put it in my contract, to protect this process? And so that's what we've done here.
Right. So, and we can't stop you from doing what you're doing. The contract says only 1 or 2 rounds of revisions, whatever you put in here. But you then have to stick to it, right? We can only provide you with the guidance, and then it's up to each of you, which you all know who are watching. So, all right. Some of the other things we added to this full service design contract, which was fabulous before we even made the revisions, and now we've added even more. So after the initials, and I'm just flipping through, I think my favorite part is, again, the fact that they don't have to mess with the contract itself too much, because we've added schedules or scope at the end. So our full service design contracts have a Schedule A, project scope, and investment estimate, where you're actually per room telling them approximately an estimated investment level. So the client is not completely shocked when it actually happens. And if you didn't know how much it would cost, the pre-construction design planning could help you with that. And I've even told people change the title of the pre-construction design planning if it's just, like Leslie said, it's kind of like investigating before you actually take on the project. So we added a project scope and investment estimate in the back, a project timeline, conceptual design, how long should it take? When should the client expect to hear from you? Detailed design phase, and then purchasing project management timelines, so that the designer acknowledges that this is their deliverables. It's holding the interior designer accountable, as well as giving the client good information as to what they can expect.
Yeah, and if I can interject here, this is, one area where there's always a disconnect in communications between the designer and the client is just sort of the process. The phases. And I find a lot of my clients, my more successful clients who've been in business longer, definitely have the phased approach down. Some of them are very explicit about it in their contracts. Others are just, they explain it in the meetings, but the contracts more or less follow that anyway. So I think the phased approach is really important, especially for setting client expectations. And again, keeping everybody understanding what part of the project we are in.
Yes.
That's key.
Yes. Okay. And then we added a payment for design services, separate schedule on the back, payment. So they understand, when is the design fee due? 50% when, other 50% when will they ask for furniture money? When will they ask for project management money? It's all laid out here, with the ability then to discuss it with the client, not just have them sign it. And then we give an incredibly detailed example scope to these contracts, right? So if someone doesn't know how to write a scope on their contract, we give an example on the back. Have I missed anything really big here from either one of you?
No, I don't think so. I think, we had put together some good contracts there initially. And now that we've had a chance to work with them for a couple of years and get some feedback from clients, and also, COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, I think the interior design industry, saw some changes because of that. I don't want to say there were sea shift, type changes, but definitely some things came up and people looked at things differently now. So, and I think we've addressed a lot of that in these updated versions.
Yeah, and we've got incredible feedback from those who have already purchased our past contracts and got the new ones. They literally, so many of our designers are like, I ran it by my lawyer, they didn't have one change.
Great.
Right? So, a testament to David and how much experience he's had, and thanking him for us to have helped us create these contracts. To have a contract created from scratch from a lawyer is a little more difficult, because you have to really understand your own process to relay it to David.
Right, right. I mean, when I meet with my clients and they bring me an existing contract, I'm always very optimistic that it won't take more than a couple of hours. But more often than not, it's a 3 to 4 hour process because it's like you said. I mean, it's not just fixing the contract, but it's really working with the designer so that they understand their process and then their process is accurately reflected in the contract.
Yes.
So, that's not inexpensive.
Right.
It's a pretty big investment. I'd say it's 3 to 4 times what we're talking about with the contract bundle here, where you're getting 4 separate contracts plus your, training
Yeah.
or
It's
at least explanations, right?
absolutely. And I don't even know, Leslie, do you have the landing page up by any chance?
No, but I can look for it.
Yeah, I'm curious myself. I just didn't look at it before we got here. I know we repriced the bundle. I just want to make sure I'm clear with everybody on, but if you click the link in the description, you will find out how much we're charging for them. And I have to tell you, ridiculously incredible value. I have looked at other people's contracts. I have studied other people's contracts, and I have to tell you, the contracts David put together with Leslie and I are top-notch, easiest if it matches your business model, or if you don't have your business model set yet, can you please trust me and know that this is a business model that's going to save you from losing money. Now, somebody wrote, Holly, I charge hourly in 6-minute increments, plus commission on any trade brought to the table it purchased, plus out of pocket like travel, parking, FedEx. So again, our contracts lay out what is your
All
policy.
those things.
Yeah, what all your policies are. And if you do hourly in 6-minute increments, you lay that out in the contract. But yeah, we cover all of that within these contracts to make sure that you don't get screwed by a client getting upset with you. Let's be honest, there's always a spot in most renovations, at least big jobs, where the client gets upset for a moment in time. It may not be necessarily at the designer, right, Leslie? I mean,
there's always a messy middle. And I let clients know that early, and I remind them of it often. Like, remember, this is the part we talked about. It's going to suck. You spent all this money. Your house is torn up. Things are moving slowly. And
yes.
this helps with that. I mean, you're covered, you can get through to the other side, but that is a normal part of running a design project. There's going to be a messy middle where things suck.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, then there's also those odd situations, and I probably see them more than you because, they come up when you need to get a lawyer involved. And that's, when there is a tradesperson who really drops the ball on a project. And, I've had a $50,000, not me personally, but I've seen a client with a $50,000 custom wallpaper snafu, right? I've seen mirrors damaged in transit. I've heard of, hand-blown glass chandeliers making it from Italy to the United States only to be smashed in the warehouse, right? So I mean, there's all kinds of little things that happen, and I think our contracts are pretty good about trying to accommodate for those sort of what ifs.
Right. Not everything is within your control as a designer, and you need to be protected when it's not within your control. And these contracts do that as well. So, all right. I don't think I missed anything. Anything coming to anyone's mind?
Nope. I just want to say I did pull up the contract bundle site, and the bundle is only $575 for all 4 contracts.
So full service design contract, David, if they were to hire you to do it from scratch for a similar business model, roughly
$2,000.
Okay, so there you go, people. If you need a contract and you want it to be one that's written by a lawyer, we have one for you. So click the link, check them out. And I know you're not going to be disappointed because we provide not only the contracts, we provide Canva templates for the proposals and that you can customize, and a training video on how to use these contracts. So no brainer for those who need contracts or updates to your contracts. So I think that's all I've got. Final words, Leslie?
Great.
Any final words, Leslie?
If you don't have a contract, buy these.
Yeah.
You need it.
Right. Or if you've makeshifted your contract over the years from a bunch of other ones. So now you have basically a Band-Aid contract. Never a good idea. Get the contracts. Any final words, David?
Yeah, if you're working with a Franken contract, you might as well not even be working with a contract at all. And of course, if you're not working with a contract, you're still working with a contract. It's just a matter of what you can prove, and you don't want to be in that situation. So
great advice.
Yeah, mic drop. right there. You don't want to be in that situation, so protect yourself. All right. Thank you, David. Thank you, Leslie. For anyone who's watching live or on replay, put your questions below. We'll try to answer them for you. Tag me or tag Leslie, and we will hop on. And if we need David's help, we'll pull him in to answer that too. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Go have a
Thank
great
you.
Monday, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.